Доброго ранку, шановні колеги.
Good morning, dear colleagues. We continue our working day and we'll talk about free courses of Ukrainian language, results and plans, and we'll hear from Anastasia Rozlutska, coordinator of the free Ukrainian language classes, Olena Bazylivska, project coordinator in Kyiv, Kateryna Melnyk, teacher, and Mariana Doboni, also teacher at the free Ukrainian language classes. Good morning. The project Free Classes in Ukrainian is a volunteer movement now, because over the 2 years we've been working, we started in 17 cities of Ukraine. At the moment, we work in 14 towns and cities, and we have involved more than 120 volunteers, teachers, designers, coordinators, just helpers who supported us in our art events. And why am I saying that this is a huge volunteer movement? Because for over 2 years, these people have been providing their expertise for free. They share their knowledge with those who want to learn Ukrainian language, who want to join some artistic events. We have expanded to the east quite a lot. We had a sub-project which was called Classes for Liberated Towns, Slovyansk, Kramatorsk, Druskivka, Konstantinivka, and we have launched our classes in some of the cities, and in some of them we have already completed the classes. And we have not just conducted classes in Ukrainian language, we also acquainted people with Ukrainian art, Ukrainian books, and all this kind of stuff. I'll emphasize our efforts in the East, as we paid special attention to that region. We went there with our artists. We brought there more than 4,000 books that we collected here in Kyiv. We handed them over to libraries and schools that were restored. We just handed them out to kids and displaced persons in the streets. Also, during Santa Claus's, St. Nicholas days, we handed out sweets and books and all this. And we also run a lot of creative events. Tatiana Sheptitska coordinates this. We've been working with the House of Teachers. We had creative soirees dedicated to the heroes of Kruty, to Mikhailo Kotsubinski, to Yuri Litvin, Alexei and Vasil Stus, Ukrainian poets who died in Soviet prisons. We have a lot of projects. I'd like to just enumerate them, and then I'll switch over to our plans. Our next project was to work with the kids of the military and children among the displaced persons. Kateryna Melnyk was coordinating this segment. As of today, in 14 cities, we have 62 volunteers, coordinators, teachers, and designers for our courses. We plan, in most of the cities we're coming to a logical completion of the courses, and we start to enroll people for the third stage of our classes. So we plan for the next year, academic year, 2015-16, we plan to hold a camp for our volunteers, also courses for children in Kyiv. We plan to stage this project in August, and we continue to enroll students for those free courses, and we continue to work on our projects in the East. What is also important, we join forces with our state services. For instance, in Kherson, there were free courses of Ukrainian language for state officials. Also in Kirovograd, in Dnipropetrovsk, our volunteers have held a preparation set for the preparation for external evaluation, assessment, exams, not only in Ukrainian language, but also in chemistry and some other subjects. So this is not just the knowledge of Ukrainian language, this is also providing people with access to Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian literature. So we mostly position ourselves as a cultural and educational voluntary movement. And now Olena Bazylivska, who is our project coordinator in Kyiv, I'd like to sum up the results of the project in Kyiv and tell you about people who have joined the project here and thank them very much. This year was indicative as we saw that people want to learn Ukrainian and there is a need to learn it, but regrettably even in the capital of Ukraine there is not always an opportunity to learn Ukrainian even if you pay for this. The number of those who want to learn Ukrainian after the events in Euromaidan and in the east of Ukraine has grown significantly, and even resettlers from Russia join us, those who came here because they do not agree with the regime in Russia and they want to learn the Ukrainian language as they think that this is a duty of people who live on the territory of a state. Also, we'd like to say that the number of those who want to learn the language has grown due to people who either have not known Ukrainian at all or knew it on a very primitive level, who had psychological and language barriers and never used the language. And we also talk here about IDPs from east and south of Ukraine and also from Russia, people from Russia. Last year we have formed 10 groups, and now this year we had 15 groups, including 2 groups for IDPs. When the project started, we had 400 students. Due to different reasons, some people have left, and at the moment now 150 people will get certificates about successful completion of the courses. We can explain this dwindling in numbers because, you know, the project is volunteer project. We sometimes have a problem with premises. Also, we do not have groups that would work on weekends, and also there's a specific features of our students who are IDPs and who do not stay for long in one place. Some of them have come back home, some have went further to other places in Ukraine. In Kyiv we met musicians, historians, literature people, authors, and we organized memory evenings. There was a memory soiree for the heroes of Kruty. Tetiana Sheptitska was responsible for this. As far as teachers are concerned, as soon as we publicized the enrollment of teachers, almost 60 volunteers have come up, and more than half of them were teachers of Ukrainian. We have not provided everyone with an opportunity to teach, but we think that we will work with them next academic year. And our teachers are young representatives of the best educational establishments of Ukraine. They are graduates from the Kyiv State National University and Kyiv Mohila Academy and Polytechnic Institute. Kateryna Melnyk, Mariana Doboni, Ostap Ukrainets, Lesa Karpenko, and some others. Олена Заболотня, Юлія Галета, Ольга Петренко, Євгенія Плічко, Ірина Коцюбинська, Анастасія Кузнєцова, Мирослава Косар, Олена Гритичанюк, Наталя Шилко. Also, it's worth mentioning that as we don't have a constant premises of our own, we were helped free of charge by other organizations like the Central Library named after Pavlo Tychina, the Smoloskip Publishing House, Biochemistry Institute, the Kyiv Youth Employment Center, and some others. We are very grateful to owners of those spaces who helped these courses, although they understood that they will have to pay for some electricity or things like this, but they did not charge us for anything. Our special thanks go to the director of the Smoloskip Publishing House, Rostislav Semkiv, who's been hosting us for the second year running, and if there's a need to conduct an additional event, he also helps us, meeting us halfway. Also, we'd like to mention a old standing friend of Free Ukrainian Classes, Deputy Minister for Education Pavlo Polansky, who helped us to find premises, who helped us in organizing courses in the regions. And we are very grateful to him for this. We want to thank also our students as they join in and want to learn the Ukrainian language. Very often they help us in organizing cultural events, and they are very active there. And the enrollment for the new stage of free courses of the Ukrainian language has started. You can fill in the form at our site mova.ua.org.ua, mova.ua.org.ua, and then you will be contacted and groups will be formed. When we started the project, it had the beginning, but we don't see the end of the project. We see our further work, further expansion, and the organization of new and new events like this. I'm Kateryna Melnyk. I teach in my group at Free Ukrainian Language Classes. Besides, I do coordinate the work of teachers within the framework of the educational process, as we have a thing that we do not have a unified program, but we have general habits and skills that our students will gain in the process of learning. And so our teachers may optionalize the material that they offer. In this context, a teacher does work as a trainer of sorts, and the group becomes a self-improvement group as they can share knowledge between themselves, and every lesson is a training that provides, first of all, for practical skills so that people feel comfortably in the role of communicative situations in the society. As you know, our main target audience, although this is not our sole audience, target audience, are people who do not speak Ukrainian. Those are people who have not just language barrier, but a psychological barrier, as to start to talk to people in a shop or on the street or moreover with friends who have been used to you talking other languages is not easy. My previous students were people who did understand Ukrainian but did not use it. Starting from our third or fourth meeting, those people can talk Ukrainian on quite a decent level in some limited situations, and starting from the fifth class meeting, we give them a task to speak Ukrainian to someone outside of the audience and then share their impressions. And impressions are different, of course, but most of them do realize that they can, for instance, go to a store and ask to show them something in Ukrainian, and this inspires people to gain more and more on language ground. And the education in itself, we not just look into grammar or lexics. This is not the school program. This is what people need in their lives. So every teacher tries to adjust what they have to a maximum extent to their audience, to their students. So we play, we look into some interesting things about the language, we learn something new, and this is an integration into the cultural Ukrainian space. As we look into the stories of Ukrainian public or art figures, we read books, and sometimes people come to us who have not even held the Ukrainian book in their hands for the entire life, and then they start to read, and then they come with round eyes to us saying, "Look, the Ukrainian literature appears to be so interesting," and they start to feel themselves very well in this environment, and our main task is to immerse them into a Ukrainian environment which is new for them and make them the agents of influence, let's call them so, and make them create such an environment around themselves. And this does work as they come to us again and again. Some people come for the second year of classes, and they emphasize that they started to work to speak Ukrainian to their friends and use Ukrainian on Skype, and they bring along friends of their friends, and this is one of the most important markers as the circle of communication does expand, and we find more and more people who want to join in this space.
Good afternoon, I'm Mariana Doboni. I'm also the teacher of the free Ukrainian language classes. I joined this group in 2014, and I worked with different groups of people. There was a group of middle level knowledge group. We were learning how to correctly define the time and so on, and we were talking with them. In the summer, I was lucky, I had the beginners, and these were mostly people who came to Ukraine from abroad, and we started from pronunciation. During the last year, I worked with the group, and when we were mostly focusing our attention on conversation skills. When first time you come to class, people are all silent, they look at you, and there's a sparkle in their eyes, and you understand that they want to talk, they want to gain this knowledge, but probably they are afraid. And our first task is to start talking to them and help them overcome the language barrier, both linguistic and psychological language barrier. And for that, personally myself, I use different exercises, and very often I apply such methods as work in groups, work in pairs, or creating non-comfortable situations, modeling the situation. So when our student in real life falls into such a situation, he will know how to speak, what to say. As to achievements, and that is great joy when in some time you realize that the student who during 3-4 classes was just sitting and looking at you suddenly starts speaking, and they speak so that you cannot stop them. You feel that the person feels happy because the person started speaking Ukrainian. Also, among the achievements is when a person comes who's a Russian language organizer or moderator, and the person says, I was moderating in Ukrainian first time. Also, when people come and they see I read an article and I noticed mistake in it, tell me, is that correct or not? And another achievement is when your classes become not just communication between teacher and student, but when the classes become a platform for cultural exchange. When you ask them, what have you read, what are interesting things happening in Kyiv, and people say that I attended this event and I advise you to go there. Also, the students pay attention to some events in the history of Ukraine, and that is also very important. I cannot forget the case when once we were discussing in our classes the short story by Grigory Tutunnik, 3-page story, and we analyzed it in such detail, and one of the students said, is it true that there are so many ideas in this very little 3-page short story? And when you understand that people start perceiving Ukrainian culture differently, that is a big satisfaction for me as a teacher. And also I would like to warn about certain dangers or challenges which all our Ukrainian language community faces. When students start paying attention to mistakes, that means that there are many, many mistakes around. And it's true about our newspapers, about our magazines and our billboards. And I would like to hope that the level of Ukrainian language knowledge will grow, not among our Russian language speakers, but among the Ukrainian speaking population. That's a very interesting project. The first question from Ukrainian Crisis Media Center: do you work with those people who speak the mixture of Ukrainian and Russian language? As a teacher, I can tell you, yes, sometimes when people switch to Ukrainian, people use Russian structures or some Russian words, and that's the normal process of learning the language. And just like in other cases, the language practice is important. The longer the person stays in language environment, the more person reads classical literature, because in modern literature there are different styles. We know what's happening around us, but when people read Ukrainian language in time, the person levels up and improves the knowledge of the language. We work a lot on stylistics, and people in some time making mistakes says, well, I know, and the person corrects himself or herself, and that is quite a natural process. The next question, if you have, or maybe you want to clarify something. Once not, then I will have another question. How long does this course last for beginners? How many classes you need? We work for the second year, and the cycle is a program is 36 academic hours, which is half a year. But we also have different cultural events taking place, so it takes 6 months. That is how long our training continues, and this time is enough for beginners. For those who did not speak Ukrainian before, Kateryna told how they start speaking at the 5th lesson. Of course, those some foreigners who have to first learn the basic level. So we have 4 levels: basic, beginners, medium, and advanced students. Thank you. Once you have no questions, I would like to thank you. Please come to us, share your news, and our next briefing is in